Hello everyone, my name is Rob from RobOps, and today we're going to be walking through part one of a three-part series focused on front-end development. In this series, we're going to go through all the steps required so that you can get a website running from scratch. In this video, we'll be focused on creating a front-end locally that will serve as your web page. In future videos, we'll walk through all the steps required to get the front end hosted on the internet. In the last video in the series, we'll show how you can automate the deployment and enable a development workflow that will make it easy to rapidly iterate on your web page. At the end of this video, you should have a fully responsive website that will render perfectly on mobile and desktop, as you can see in the running demo. In order to accomplish this, we'll be creating a front-end application using the Next.js framework. This framework is built on top of React, and it will make it easy for us to create the skeleton for our project. We'll be running the website locally, meaning it will only be accessible on our workstation. For the design components, we'll be using a styling framework called Tailwind. That will make it easier for us to make the website look professional. In this video, I'll be creating a simple landing page and with an about section, but when you're following along, feel free to make it your own and create a website to fit your needs. Now, let's jump into the code. So now that we're in the code view, we're going to be running a few commands to get us started. Now, we're simply going to be following the documentation that's available on the Next.js website to bootstrap our app. And so in order to start, I'm just in my dev folder locally, and I'm going to write npx create next app at latest. I'm going to put the name for my directory, which is going to be RobOps web. And I'm going to say yes and click enter. So this is going to bootstrap the Next.js skeleton that I mentioned previously. Once that's been created, I'm going to go into my folder that I just created, which is called RobOps web. And if I go ls to list the directories, I'm going to see a bunch of files were created. Now, if I go into my IDE and I load the folder into my workspace by just going into add folder to workspace. I'm going to click add, and I'm going to see RobOps web. And so I'm going to have an app folder, node modules, a public folder, a gitignore, and a bunch of configuration files, which we'll get into later. What I want to focus on here is the app directory, where we have a layout.tsx and a page.tsx. These two files are important files that we're going to be working with first. If I open them up, you can see they contain a bunch of JavaScript in both, and we'll be mostly removing most of this as a starting point. But before I do any of that, I want to run the website locally. Like I was mentioning, when I run npm run dev, this is going to create a local server running on my computer on localhost 3000. So now if I go back to my browser and I go to localhost 3000, we're going to see a website. Now this is the code that we've bootstrapped. So we've completed part one of the project. We want to run a front end locally. It was really easy. It only took a few commands, but now we have the Next.js framework loaded and running locally on our machine. So now that we have our front end running locally, we're going to switch over to a view where we can basically update both the layout and the page.tsx. And to start, we're going to basically remove everything within the home. And we're just going to go simple h1 tag that says hello world, and we're going to just remove this image import, and we're going to click save. And you'll notice our web page updates right away, and it's going to say hello world at the bottom. This is expected. We just want to remove all of the boilerplate confusing code from our view. And we want to do the same thing in the layout.tsx. We're going to basically remove everything except the body tags and the children. Remove all of this stuff. And basically, there we go. We just have a simple hello world application and a page. And that page simply has hello world. Now, there's some important things that you should understand about Next.js and how it structures its code. And for that, I would recommend definitely looking at the documentation that's available online. Now, one thing we're also going to set up is our linter. And so in order to do that, we're going to switch back over to the code view. And so a linter is going to basically make sure that the formatting of all of our code is consistent. And so if I just go to our package.json here and I go to scripts, I'm going to add a script here called lint, and it's just going to be next lint and save. And now if I go back to my terminal, I should be able to run npm run lint like this. And I'm going to enforce strict linting, and this is going to install the dependencies to set up my linting. So now that that's done, we'll be able to configure our styling library. And so for this, we're going to be using Tailwind CSS. And so if I switch back here, we can see what Tailwind is. It's essentially a design library that's going to make it very easy for us to make our website look really good. The value of this is you don't need to be a professional designer to create really good looking websites. As you can see, some very common websites and some very big companies use these frameworks to abstract away the complexities of being really good at design. So we're going to do the same thing here. And so in order to set that up in our application, I'm just going to go to the full screen code view again. And what we're going to need to do is install some dependencies. And so if I go to my terminal and I run npm install -d tailwind css at tailwind css /post css, this is going to install the dependency required to use Tailwind in my project. Once I've done that, I'm going to go over to my code view, and I'm going to go into the post CSS folder, config folder, and you can see plugins. It's already configured to use Tailwind post CSS, which is great. And if I go into global CSS, I can see that it's already importing tailwind.css. So I want to use this library in any of my components. I just need to go to layout, and I need to import my global CSS. And this is going to make sure that the Tailwind library is being loaded as expected. So in order to test this, I'm simply going to grab some code and paste it in my page and see how my page renders. And so if I go here, and once I do that, we can see that the formatting on our website has changed. It says welcome Next.js, but instead of it being at the top corner, it's now in the middle because it's being formatted with the styling that we've provided in the class names here. So it's saying min, h to screen, flex call. These are just instructions for how to style this. So what we've done now is we've run our app locally. We've removed everything from the layout and the page.tsx, and we've configured linting and Tailwind, our design library, within our Next.js application. So we have all the prerequisites required to actually start building our website. To do that, we're going to browse some of the available Tailwind components and put them into the places we think they make the most sense to create our website. So I'm going to go back to the Tailwind page, and I'm going to basically show how I would typically browse through Tailwind. We have these things called UI blocks. And so these are essentially pre-built sections of our website that we can use in our application. And so like I mentioned at the start, we're going to be building something really simple. So all I'm going to need is a header, a hero section, and a footer. And then for the About Us page, we're going to take code from a simple About You page as well. And so if you scroll through here, you can see there's like several different elements. There's 404 pages, there's headers, there's banners, full landing pages that you can use, pricing pages. So we're just going to click an element here called headers. And here you can see all the different, like, interact with the actual component itself. There's a product, you have, these very comprehensive like header pages. And what you'll also notice that they're fully responsive, which if you've ever done front-end development before, you'll know that making sure that your website appears as you expect it to appear on all devices typically takes a lot more work than what you initially think. So for our use case, I just want a very simple header. So something like this fits my needs. And so as you can see, there's React, there's Vue, there's HTML. For us, Next.js is an application that's built on top of React. And so the React code base will serve us well. And so if I just click code here, you can see that all of the code required to render this header is all available here. And all we're gonna do is copy this code directly, and we're gonna swap back to our code view. And what we're gonna do is create a folder within our app directory called components. Components are reusable chunks of code that are going to be basically put in place or stacked on top of each other to create our website. And so in here, I'm going to create a new file, and it's going to be called header.tsx. And like I mentioned before, I'm just going to copy all of that code from Tailwind directly. I'm going to click save. Now you'll notice there's a couple of issues with that. I can see there's some red lines up here, and that's because there's some dependencies that this UI assumed we had, but we don't. And so in order to rectify that, I'm going to go back and install those dependencies directly. And so to do that, I'm simply going to take headless UI React, and I'm going to go npm install, and that's going to install the headless UI React. And then I'm going to take hero icon / React and do the same thing. And so this is going to be basically responsible for adding the icons, and this is going to be responsible for the headless UI. And what you'll notice is the underlines go away because we've installed the dependencies and the application has picked up those dependencies. So we have the component, but if I click refresh, we notice nothing has changed on our website. And this is expected. What we need to do now is essentially add this component to either our page or our layout. Before we do that, we have to think about where this would typically go. Now, a header is something that's going to be present across most of the website. And so to put it on each individual page wouldn't make much sense. And so a layout is always rendered, and it renders pages within it under this children tag. And so what we want to do is add the header within our layout. And so in order to do that, I first have to import it. And so to import it, I'm going to say import header from, and I'm going to say components header. I'm going to click save here, and this is actually going to load the header component. So if there's any issues with the actual header itself, I would have gotten an error here, but I didn't. And now what I'm going to do is load the header here, remove the error. So a few things here. We have now a header on our website, and if I click Control-C, this is going to allow us to go into something called compatibility mode. It's going to allow us to render a device toolbar. And so this shows what actually it will look like on multiple different devices. So I go into an iPhone 14. This is how our page would render on a phone. And as you can see, instead of having the list items across the top, we have a simple drop down that is going to change between products, feature, marketplace, company, and login. And then I'm just going to go back to responsive and back to our normal view. So this is great. Obviously, it's not for our use case. It's simply copy and pasted. just copying and pasting things into our application isn't going to serve us very well. And so what I want to do is go back to the actual code and really kind of like understand what's going on here. And so we have a lot of code here that we're not going to use, and it's unnecessary. And so what I want to draw attention to is a few things. Firstly, is this navigation. This is just essentially an array that is going to have all of the things across the top of the page that we're using. And so like I said before, all we want in our application is home and about. It's exporting a default function called example, which we're just going to call header because we know exactly what we need it to be. And it's using something called a use state. And so this is what's actually responsible for the menu item that I showed previously, opening and closing, going from a hamburger menu to an X. This is what's basically handling that state. Not something that we need to necessarily understand too deeply, but it's good to know what this is. Now, the return section is essentially returning our header. And so as you can see, we have the logo in this image tag. And then we have the on-click, which is basically when you click on the mobile version of the hamburger menu, it's going to change from hamburger to an X. And then we have this login. And so right now we don't really care about the login, so we're actually going to just remove it. And what's important to understand is there's actually two sections here. One is what's going to render for mobile, and one that's going to render for the web page itself. And so I'm going to delete both of those, and I'll see when I go back to the website, we now just have home and about. And if I click them, it just goes to an href that we have set up, which is completely fine. And if I go into my responsive view, I notice that my modal still works, and I just have home and about, which is exactly what we want. So this is how we're going to set up this website. We're essentially going to do the exact same thing for our hero section, which is the main body, which we're going to be replacing this text with, and the footer. And then we're going to add another page for the about section. So in order to do that, I'm going to go back to Tailwind, and I'm going to go and start looking at the hero sections. As you can see, there's like a bunch of really good looking hero sections. For the purposes of this video, I'm going to just pick this one called split with bordered screenshot. And in the exact same way, I'm going to copy this, and I'm going to go back to our code view, and I'm going to, instead of going into components, I'm simply going to just paste this and click save, and I'm going to hop back to the slides, and we'll see our page loads, and we have the new hero section that appears exactly as it appears in the mockup. And there's a couple things we need to remove. Like, we don't need the what's new and just shipped at the top. I think like our nav bar supersedes those. Similarly, the icon is repeated. So we could do some light customization here to just make sure that it's displaying exactly what we want it to display. So in order to do that, I'm just gonna go back to the code view, and I'm gonna go into this page section, and I'll see, just shipped and what's new inside this A tag, and I'm just gonna take it out completely. And if I click save, we'll see that it gets bumped up. And then we'll also notice that we have like these images here that we can definitely just get rid of. And so now we have basically a very simple deploy to the cloud with confidence. And instead of that, for our experiment, we can update the copy here to just say platform engineering with RobOps. So now that we have the hero section, we're going to swap back to the slides, and we're going to go and find our footer. And so as you can see, there's a few footers here that all look quite nice. I'm just going to, again, just grab this 4-column simple, which is overkill for what we're doing here. But again, I think just to illustrate the pattern that we're taking here with our development, I'm going to go into components. I'm going to click footer.tsx, and I'm going to paste this, and I'm going to click save. And here we have our footer. Same pattern. we're going to put our footer in our layout because in a similar way to our header, and we're simply going to put the footer underneath the children. We have a bunch of different solutions, support, company, legal, etc. that we don't need. So we're going to be removing a bunch of this stuff to reflect a footer that more resembles our web page. And so to do that, we completely don't need solutions. We completely don't need support. We essentially just need about, and then we can keep the legal stuff. So when I save this, it's probably going to give us a problem because this navigation is looking to map and is expecting certain things to be there. And so because we don't need that, we can simply take those sections and remove them. So remove this. And it doesn't like line 32 as well, which has the exact same thing here. Let's remove. And now our page is rendered. And if I scroll down, we just have about, terms of service, privacy policy, and license. So our web page is looking pretty good. If I click Control C and see what it looks like on a mobile device, we can see that everything is compacted nicely. We have our central image that now goes underneath our hero text. And if I scroll down, instead of being side by side, our footer is now stacked, which is what we would want on a mobile device. So now that that is done, what we're going to do is create our about page. And this is an important concept specific to Next.js, but important to talk about. And so if I go back to our full screen plus code view, essentially we have this components folder, and this components folder is going to house all of our reusable components that we're going to be using on our front end. Our page.tsx represents where our customers will land as soon as they hit our website. So in this case, our website is localhost, but if, in later videos we'll see it's going to be hosted at app.anytimeagile.com. This is going to basically be where we land. Now, every website has navigation. So if you click about, it'll navigate to a /about page. Here, obviously, it says this page can't be found because it doesn't exist yet. But to represent this in Next.js, what we have to do is create a folder called about. And in this about folder, we have to create a page.tsx. And when we do that, what this is going to allow us to do is essentially create a redirect to this file. And so now if I just get like a super simple return here of like h1 like hello from about. Now if I go /about, we can see hello from about. And so this is basically how Next.js handles redirects and routing within the layout component. And so if I go back to full screen code, actually if I go to the slides, we're going to pick up an about us section here. And if I scroll down, there's like a section called about pages, which is great. And I'm just going to take this first one here because it looks pretty good. I'm going to copy this. And like before, I'm just going to copy this directly. And I'm going to now go to our web page. Now you'll notice something's weird. Like we have a nav bar in here and a login, and then we have our nav bar on top of it. But our about page looks pretty good. And also we have two footers. So the about page obviously has a header of its own, a footer of its own, and a bunch of pre-baked things. So we're gonna have to go in and do a little bit of dissecting. But essentially I have a website with a regular landing part section and an about section, which is great. So now what I'm gonna do is go back to our full screen code view, and I'm gonna start just taking out things that we don't need here. And you'll notice that it's actually complaining about a few things which we'll also touch on. So you can see there's these sections that have been designated as like the header. Don't need, so we're going to take that out. And once we take that out, our header will kind of go back to normal. I think actually I'll use this view so you can kind of like see what's happening. Personally, I think what we need is just, we're changing the way people connect our mission and a picture. Everything below it can be gone because we don't typically, I don't think we would have a use for it. So the hero section we'll keep, the content section we'll keep, and the image section. But everything below we can get rid of. So if I go here and I click save, it goes away. The logos we can get rid of. And like I mentioned at the beginning of the video, if you want to keep this stuff, like feel free, make it your own. But for the purposes of what we're trying to do, we're trying to build something simple, lightweight. And like you can see here, like we had that footer here. And there we go. So now we have our about page along with our old footer and the home page. Great. So now we have the components of our website, but you'll notice a few things that we actually don't need this use state because we took away the header. We have a bunch of stuff that's not being used. So all we really need is the stats. We have our about page set up, which is great, but you'll notice that when I try to go click the home page or the about page, there's no concept of navigation built in here. And so we're going to want to fix that because obviously we want our users to be able to go from the home page to the about page and henceforth and backwards. And so in order to do that, we're going to go to our header actually, because that's where we're going to be interacting with the navigation. And so Next.js has a link component that it provides. And so if I go import link from Next link, it will add this link component. And this is basically going to handle the navigation. And if I go to the component itself, here's the image. So I'm going to just replace the A tag with this link component. And instead of this href, I'm going to basically put a inside of the href here, I'm going to say slash, and in here I'm going to say slash about. And I actually just want this to be slash because if I click the home my page icon, I just want to be able to go to the home page. And so I scroll down here, we have this navigation.map, which is going to render the item.name, which is the navigation items. And so item.href in this case will be our link. And instead of an A tag, I want to replace this with the link component. And I need to do this in two places. I need to do this also in the mobile view here. So I'm going to replace the link, and I'm going to replace the link, and click save. And now if I go to my web page and I click home, I'll load my home page. Click about, I'll go to my about page, and if I click my logo, I will go to my home page. So as you can see, our website is looking pretty good. We can now go from about to home. Now, obviously, this version of developing a front end is a little different than obviously creating your elements from scratch. I will say that if you do want to build these pages, there is a bunch of different sections that you can pull from that go as low level as simple stats sections to as big as full-on landing page. And like I said earlier, if you do want to see all of the code that was used to create this website, it's all going to be available on my GitHub page. And if you want to ask questions about anything, feel free. It's really up to you how much time you want to spend building your front end. You don't necessarily have to be a designer to make things look good. I am by no means a designer, but I do think this website looks pretty good for the amount of time we spent on it. And I also don't condone copying and pasting code that you don't understand, but in today's development workflow where you do have co-pilots and you do have AI assistants, you can get them to basically break down the code for you so that you can understand it and edit it to your needs. I have a decent background with React and Tailwind and Next.js. I've been working with it for a little while, so I know largely, I understand this code base, and so, me copying and pasting this is not advocating for you to just go and copy and paste code. But for the purpose of this video, to show you how you can create a good looking front end in relatively little time, this was the best avenue to do that. Now that we have the front end running, and we can just go back to the code and do a quick code review of what specifically we've done. So as you can see, we've added our linting rules, we've added some development dependencies, we've configured Tailwind, we've created our layout, which is a very simple layout with a header and a footer that will render children pages within it. We've updated our landing page to have a simple hero section. And we've created a about page that has an about us section that contains a hero along with a content and image. So this is the website that we're going to be using or we're going to be hosting. So all of the code here, in our next video, we're going to show what it's going to take to push this to a domain that we've purchased and access this website over the internet. So if you did enjoy the video, check out the repository. Like I mentioned, this is part one of a 3-part series. So what we've done in this video is we've created our front end that we will be using to essentially host on the internet. We're going to be using AWS to take our files here, host them in an S3 bucket, and make them accessible through CloudFront using a domain that we've purchased. So that will be the next video, but for this video, I hope you enjoyed. And if you did like what you see, please consider liking and subscribing. If you're interested in engaging in conversation, join my Discord at RobOps, and all of the code that I mentioned several times in this video is available on my GitHub page. And if you're interested in more of a long form content or you want to read about this, feel free to check out my blog at robertdepolito.me. So thanks again, appreciate your time and have a great week, and I look forward to making the next video.